because the disciples, not just the apostles, the disciples, those who followed Christ, were in that upper room. They had denied Christ. They'd run from him at his death. They were afraid that something would happen to them. They were chagrined, depressed, anxious, worried. And he enters the room. Christ returns. And he says to those disciples, "Peace be with you." Oh, my brothers and sisters, what a gift to these disciples who had been so unfaithful, who felt so terrible, who were in such great pain and loss and not knowing. And then he says, "I breathe on you. I send you, I give you the gift of unity. The unity between the Father and the Son, the gift of the Holy Spirit to guide you, to direct you, to give you new courage, to know you're forgiven." And then he says, "Your sins are forgiven you. Go out now and do the same." Father Bill Bausch has an incredible story. I just want to take a couple of minutes. I don't want to spend too long today because it's a great feast. But Bill Bausch has this wonderful story of a friend of his, a priest, who in his parish had a young man in his 40s who was dying of AIDS. This is some years ago, of course. And he went to see him one day, and his whole family were so chagrined and so separated and distanced. And he was living in some place remotely in the house. They gave him food and nourishment, but there was no care, no love. There was just this separation. And the priest went up to the room and sat down on his bed and held his hand. And he said, "Tell me whatever you would want me that you want me to know." And he said, "Father, no one touches me anymore. I feel so alone. But more than anything, I feel ashamed. I feel lost. I feel just terrible." So that priest visited him every day, trying to encourage his family to reunite with him a bit, to talk to him, get his brother, his sister-in-law, and finally he's in the hospital and he's dying. And he said he went into the hospital one day and the man said to him, "Could you make a phone call for me? Could you talk to this woman, Anne, who was my dear friend? I just would love to have a word with her before I go." And so the priest called this woman, and she was so upset because he had just left her. He hadn't talked to her. She made an attempt years and years ago to reestablish the relationship, but there was just nothing. It was just no answer. But the next morning, she called back and said, "I'm going to go see him." So they went together, the priest and his best friend, Anne. She said when they walked into the room, there was a mounting tension. But when they embraced each other, all of that tension went away. And there was peace in the room, and they shared with each other, they cried with each other. And he explained to her that it wasn't because he didn't want to talk with her, but that he was so embarrassed, so ashamed, so alone, he just couldn't reach out. That young man died, having reconciled with his brother and sister-in-law. And even though his father ultimately and finally did not really, in a tender way, speak to him, there was that reconciliation, and they both knew it and believed it. When I heard that story, I thought to myself, that's exactly what was going on with those disciples. Embarrassed, ashamed, not knowing what to do next. Christ bursts through that, goes into that room, and says to them, Peace be with you. Brothers and sisters, this is the secret of today. We don't have to look for Christ. We don't have to search for the Holy Spirit. We don't have to ponder and go after God. God comes to us. He comes to us in love. He comes to us in peace. He comes to us in the gift of the Holy Spirit. What does he say? He says sin is not an action. Sin is the breaking of a relationship. So brothers and sisters, in our homes today, as best we can in our world today, restore relationships. Let the power and the gift of the Holy Spirit, not because we search for it, but that Spirit just pours out his life to us, remains with us, stays with us. Brothers and sisters, if there was ever a day for us to say, come Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, enkindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit. We will be recreated. And somehow, some way, we will renew with your gift the face of this earth. Happy Pentecost.